Fragments of Silicon, now featuring new premium currency, actual fragments of silicon.
All right, welcome to another installment of Fragments of Silicon. Joining me as always are, Petty and Gollix, the faces of fear.
Sure.
Anyway, right. So let's get to the news, such as it is, such as it shall ever be. Petty, why don't you start us off this week?
Oh, fair bit of things have happened this week. I ordered a new electric razor because mine fell in the shower and broke the shaving head. So literally the cost to replace it was about as much as a new one. So I said screw it and just upgraded.
I hate electric razors. They always pull.
The one I got's supposed to be for sensitive skin, so hopefully
It's more a problem with my hair follicles. They curl.
Same.
So, yeah. Anyway.
I also got Sonic Colors yesterday for the Switch.
My condolences.
It's not as bad, but I can definitely see the frame rate hitching and stuff.
We'll get into it a little later.
The worst glitches are not things that happen reliably.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Like I said, that's the topic of discussion. So.
Mm-hmm.
And I did find a capture device over the weekend, but it's the earlier model that only has USB 2.0. So if I wanted to use it, I would need a second monitor, which that would solve a lot of my problems if I had room for a second monitor in here. So
get yourself a monitor arm, man.
It's not as much that as it is outlets. Yeah, believe me, I wish I, could plug another monitor in here. And not.
You mean outlets on like your PC or like power outlets?
Power outlets.
The power strip?
Mine's full. And I'm already at the point
power
where...
strip to power strip. Power stripception, dude.
Yeah, connecting together.
You can do that, but it's not actually a good idea.
Connection centipede that thing, dude.
Oh,
listen,
God.
I've done it. There's only been one fire.
It was minor.
I caught it quick. All right, only got half the wall.
Oh, God.
I'm sure he doesn't want his everything to burn.
No, but it's a conversation starter, right? People come in, they go, "Oh, what happened?" It's abstract art. You tell them.
Grill.
Yeah. So
anyway,
I'm gonna see about getting a refund on that and see if I saw another one on sale at Best Buy. Next time I go out there, I'm gonna see if they still have it and may pick that up. Because I would like to be able to start doing Switch games and stuff. And also more reliably do PS4 games instead of just having to do the remote play thing, which, ooh boy, the lag on that.
Well, I mean, is that capture card really going to fill the niche, given that the lag on that?
This one, no. It's basically unusable for me.
That was a waste of what, $15?
$100.
Jeez.
Yeah.
Yeah, capture cards aren't cheap, but like you said, he's going to try to switch it for a better one.
Yeah, do you have the receipt?
Oh, God, yes.
Okay, good.
And yeah, I think they also mistook it for the, because it was an Elgato HD60. I think they might have also mistaken it for the HD60S, which has the no lag. You can literally play through the capture window because it's USB 3. I think they might have also assumed it was that, because that one goes for $100 used. So
Sounds right.
Yeah, so I already talked to them because I was at the game shop where I got it yesterday, and they were like, "Yeah, we'll take it back as long as it still works." They're cool.
That's good.
Mm-hmm.
Like,
Because yeah, I'll be there Sunday for more Digimon stuff.
Mm-hmm.
all right.
Speaking of Digimon, I got a box of the Battle of Omni set. Got some pretty decent cards. I got the alternate art for both Omnimon and Omnimon's Wart, so that's cool.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, it's just no doctor's appointments this week or next week or anything like that. So
Well, that's nice.
yeah, I think the next thing is I'm having a root canal on the 30th, so that's going to be a nice $300 to burn.
Yeah.
Anyway,
All
I
right.
think that's it from my neck of the woods.
Okay then. Well, Galax, you're up.
It's definitely starting to get dark earlier. I noticed that this evening, but that also means it's less hot, so that's ultimately not a bad thing. Yeah, work has been going pretty smoothly lately. Haven't been sleeping great, I guess.
What even is sleep?
I know, right? Yeah, nothing really dramatic in video games, I don't think. I'm still working my way through Skyward Sword. And we have, I'm gonna try and practice the Tetris Effect Connected before we have our thing on Friday. And I think that's about it. Sorry,
Okay.
I'm boring this week.
All right. Guess it's my go. Well, I mean, so good news from the tech field. Looks like we've finally isolated the audio problems I was having for the past month or so. Like Discord boosted my microphone output to the maximum. Like, I think that's happened before. Just, it was so long that kind of a rediscovery thing. So hopefully that is going to be a thing in the past. Of course, knowing how Discord, will adjust settings periodically. It might return one day. Just keep that in mind.
Or Windows Update, like to adjust settings.
Yep.
Hmm.
Like, but it's it seems to be fixed for the time being. That's the important part. Let's see. Not much in actual like goings on in the world this week. In terms of my existence, like dinner seems to be not quite agreeing with me, but took some Pepto Bismol for it. And let's see. I'm still playing through Quake. Playing through the whole thing, which admittedly I've never done. Like I've played the base campaign a lot, especially back in the day. Like the mission packs, I think I might have played a bit of the first one, but never really went through those before now. Like it's been interesting. At least interesting in that expansion pack from the '90s kind of way. In that they bolt on a few new things. It's also a lot harder. There are a lot more monsters. So many more monsters. Like it. It's actually pretty impressive how many gremlins they got on the screen for something that came out in like 97, 98, remembering correctly. Like anyway, and yeah, that's about it for my news for the week. So merrily we shall roll along to the interview portion of the broadcast. And joining us this week are Anthony and Michael Berlin of Deep Dive Interactive.
How's it going?
Hey, what's up?
It goes well. It goes well enough. How are you two doing this evening?
Pretty good. Pretty good. We've been having some internet connections lately. But connection issues lately. I'm sorry, I should say. But other than that, it's been pretty good. The fires out here.
Yeah, chilling.
Well, hopefully nothing will manifest during the broadcast.
Yeah, I
Yeah.
hope not.
And obviously afterwards. But anyway, right. So how we like to get started is we like to get to know the people behind the studio, behind the game, behind whatnot. So I suppose this is an interesting case because we've actually had you on the program before, like about 2 or so years ago, when Ventral Rights was in rather early access, if I'm remembering correctly. But reintroduction is probably in order. So our first question is usually this: what got you both interested in video games, both on a personal and a professional level?
We both have been playing video games since we were like 6 years old, 5 years old, something like that. We're twins, and so like we've been playing ever since like I think our older brother had like a Super Nintendo, and Mario, Super Mario Brothers, and ever since then we've been playing video games. We pretty much have always played consoles, and then when we got to like 12 or something like that, we started playing MMOs and stuff. And like what got us into the industry was just the fact that we kind of see like games that we grew up with not being made as much as we'd like and stuff like that. So we want to try to recapture those games that we grew up with and bring them to like today's youth and today's market. And that's basically what we did in VR, or try to do at least, for Ventral Rights, with just trying to bring all of the things that we loved from like the original games that we grew up with to the newest platform.
Yeah,
That's
we've pretty much picked up each console as they've come. I mean, it's been a little while. I think the PS4 is the last one that we've had, but up until then, we pretty much got every new one that came out. And we've just been playing games, like you said, for nearly 30 years at this point. I mean, I used to have a little wristwatch that I got from my brother that had Star Fox on it, and it was the coolest thing I've ever owned, and I miss it to this day. But yeah, gaming has always just been a huge part of our lives, and creating stuff and now making games is just an even better way to get involved with it.
okay. Like, I mean, that's not an uncommon refrain from people we have on the program, especially especially like developing games of the youth, or a nostalgia factor. Though it poses an interesting question on its own. How are you transpositioning that kind of ethos into the space of virtual reality?
Well, I mean, a major inspiration for the game was Legend of Zelda: Ocarina of Time, and we have a very similar. We attempt to give a very similar experience to that, and so far as you're going on this epic quest to save, your in this case, you're actually not saving anyone. You're avenging your slain master, but you're saving the world by and large. You have to defeat the big baddie, our version of Ganondorf, effectively. It's not like a direct ripoff. I know I'm not doing it justice, but we have our own major antagonist called Dragor, and it's pretty much these. There's a sort of rhythm to the game between regular combat, boss fights, and just exploration and upgrades and things like that. So you'll find yourself in big open areas with winding paths that may or may not turn back on themselves, and they'll lead you to different quest objectives or puzzles you'll have to solve to progress on your journey. And the whole experience, even if you look at the game visually, has a very sort of nostalgic vibe to it of what it was like to play those games back on like the N64, original PlayStation, things like that.
Yeah.
Like, I mean, I suppose that is an interesting framing, though. Granted, everything I've seen from the game doesn't really invoke a sense of nostalgia, but that might just because of the VR in general. Like, when you get down to it, VR is just really new.
Yeah, that's fair.
Yeah, and I suppose the question in that regards is: was there anything that particularly attracted you to virtual reality, or is it just something you fell into, so to speak?
I mean, just virtual reality. I've always wanted virtual reality. I remember years ago, I don't know if you guys remember, when the PlayStation 2 came out, they had a commercial for it that showed, the fictional PlayStation 9 at the time, which was basically a
Hmm.
virtual reality device. And I remember seeing that and going, oh, I can't wait until that really happens. And throughout the years, as 3D displays became available and the PlayStation Move, the Xbox Connect, all of those things, we tried all of those, and they were all steps in the right direction. And I couldn't wait until actual VR became a thing, and then it did, and I bought it, and it blew me away immediately. And then I showed it to Reaver, and then he was blown away and had to buy his own immediately. And
Yeah, I impulse bought it one night while
yeah,
sitting at work.
yeah, it had to be done because
Yeah, I was
VR is
like, I
just
gotta do it.
it's an amazing experience. It's not holodeck level like people might hope for, but it's a lot further along than I think most people think it is.
I mean, there are different scales of VR, though. What level would you say Vengeful Rights is working on?
Well, it's a PC VR game. It wouldn't work on something like the Gear VR or the Oculus Go or any of those like early on standalone, sort of novelty versions.
Right.
But anything with proper 6 degrees of freedom, it can be played on for the full experience. The Oculus Quest, for example, a lot of people play it on. We're not on the Quest store, but they
Okay.
play it through Virtual Desktop or AirLink on PC, like through Steam or the Oculus Store, and it works great for them.
Well, that's good to hear. Yeah, because just everything I've seen from the footage indicates like what they call room scale VR or full motion VR. VR.
Yeah. It's definitely wouldn't be a great seated experience. We have people play it that way, but it's not ideal. There's a lot of, full range of motion for your arms. For example, you want to be able to do these like wide swings with your sword to be able to hit enemies or be able to quickly parry and move around with
It's
hopefully
actually
without
imperative
hitting
that
a
you do
wall.
that.
Yeah.
I'm assuming there's some gesture based implementation here.
Yeah, all of the magic in the game is based off of gestures. So, like for example, you twist your hand almost like you're opening a doorknob or something to conjure a shield, or you throw fireballs by actually throwing them. You can do this big sort of kinetic thrust spell that we have. It's kind of like a force push where you bring your hand to your chest and then thrust it forward and release the button to launch out a big wave of energy, that kind of thing.
Yeah, that's the motion control heritage speaking right there. Now, maybe more elaborate, but it certainly got roots in the Wii remote and the Kinect and all that.
Yeah,
Yes,
exactly.
for sure, to some extent. Those were like very primitive implementations. What's available nowadays with especially PC VR, and although the Quest also does a great job with it, is I mean it's pretty
When we
extraordinarily precise. You'd be really blown away by it if you haven't experienced it. I remember there was a trailer they put out for the original Vive. What blew me away just by looking at it was someone was wearing a headset and someone else threw the controller to them while they were wearing the headset and they caught it out of the air because the
and we
tracking
did
is
that
so
in real
perfect.
life too.
Yeah, we tested that. We showed it to all of our friends. Like the tracking is so precise that it's exactly real time and you can literally grab something out of the air that you can't physically see because you're effectively wearing a blindfold, but it's just so good that you can grab that and it's exactly where you would expect it to be.
I mean, that is certainly impressive. Though, I suppose on the flip side of the coin, um, have you had many problems in regards to motion sickness?
Early on, slightly, like to an extent, and then in certain, if the game doesn't run at the optimal FPS, which is like 90 FPS for VR games, like that's what they should run at pretty
For
much
most PC games, anyway.
for
Some
most
like the
PC ones.
Quest,
Yeah,
I think
they
runs at
can get away with
75,
lower.
and it's
Yeah,
okay.
but like that's why I said the optimal for whatever the headset you have, like the optimal FPS it should be running at. If it runs under that FPS, it has a generally an inducing effect of getting motion sickness. And then, like I said, early on when we first got it, I know I got slightly motion sick to an extent, but quickly you got your VR legs, as they call them.
Unless you're just susceptible to that in general.
Yeah.
Yeah, there are
Which,
some people that never get over it. It seems that the majority of people do, based off what I've seen on like
mhm,
Reddit and people talking about it. But there are some people who, no matter how hard they try, they'll go in for 10 minutes at a time just to try to acclimate, and they just never adjust. I mean, that's really unfortunate. But most games offer uh, different locomotion methods like teleport, or there's a sort of effect you do where you narrow the FOV and you basically put like horse blinders on the player if they turn it on, and that helps with a lot of motion sickness. And there's other techniques that developers have to keep in mind, like giving people a fixed horizon and points of reference so that things aren't just spinning around them, that kind of stuff.
uh-huh. Like, just yeah, one of our members here is very motion sickness prone. Like,
Hmm.
anyway, so what is the degree of articulation in terms of the combat?
What
I
we
mean,
want with
it's
oh, go
pretty
ahead.
much as you can, whatever you can really do. It just depends on the amount of force that you give it. Really, there is a calculation that requires you to move the blade in a certain direction or certain speed and certain distance. Uh, so as long as you can effectively reach those speeds and that distance, then you, pretty much full articulation.
Well, the enemies are a little more limited naturally by their
Yes.
AI, but the way that the combat works in the game, the melee combat of it anyway, because there's also archery and magic, which all play a role. But the melee is somewhat arcadey. We didn't want to go for something like physics based or as realistic as a game like Blade and Sorcery you may be familiar with. It's kind of the standard for combat in VR right now. But
Right.
those games they're cool, but they're not difficult, and that's something we wanted to have in the game. Like, because if you try to keep things realistic, there's no AI currently that's going to be good enough to give you a proper challenge. You're going to walk up and stab it in the chest, and it's going to die, and then the fight's over, right? Like, so there's I don't know anyone that can code AI currently good enough to be like you're fighting an actual person when you have all of the freedom that you have in VR, right? Because you're not limited like in most games like Dark Souls where you're animation locked or anything like that. You have full range of motion yourself. So it's very difficult to try to make an enemy that can counter that. So what we've done is we have our enemies have varying degrees of aggression where they'll attack you. You can parry and you can block with your magic shield. So enemies will be very aggressive. They don't get like staggered when you hit them, although they can become that way if you deflect their attacks. But when they're attacking you, you have to defend yourself. So the game kind of becomes a rhythm similar to what you might have experienced in other fighting games of defending and counterattacking. And that was a major part of it for us. Is we didn't want you to be able to just run up and wiggle your sword inside an enemy and have them die, because a lot of early VR games did that, and some still do. But it's pretty universally regarded as the worst approach you can take.
Right. And in terms of weaponry, I'm certainly seeing swords here, but do you get like axes, maces, that kind of thing? And do they make a difference in combat?
No, the weapon selection we have is you have your melee weapons, which are swords or scepters. Scepters have they're effectively magical swords, but they also have projectiles that can be fired out that recharge over time. But if you choose to use those, oh, and they also give you the ability to potentially get like a free cast with your spells. Like you could throw a fireball and it has a chance to not consume mana when you do it. But if you use them, then they can't be enchanted, which is something we have with our blades. You can find these meteor shards throughout the world and then basically rub those along your blade to infuse it with, for example, the ability to set an enemy on fire or electrify them or steal health, things like that. And the scepter is sort of the trade off for that. Beyond that, it's mostly using your magic and your archery to supplement your swords.
Okay. And what kind of spells can you generate here?
There's 4 different schools of magic in the game. So you have destruction magic, which is elemental things. You start off with just fire. You could throw fireballs. Eventually, you unlock the ability to do a continual wave, like a cone of fire. And then you can unlock that further by, depending on how you spec, because we have a perk system in the game. You can either go where you have these bigger ultimate spells, or you can use magic to augment your arrows for archery. And also later in the game, a little bit more than halfway through, you unlock different elements. So you can also have lightning and frost magic, which work the same way as the fire magic. It's just there are certain things in the environment or enemies that are more susceptible to specific elements. And then we have protection magic, so you can create all kinds of shields or give yourself stone skin. We have healing magic, which is pretty straightforward, right? You can heal yourself directly, do a heal over time, or have a sort of AoE you place down where enemies, if you're hitting them inside it, you drain health from them. And then there's Kinesis Magic, which is basically the Force, if I had to put it in layman's terms, right? You can move things around with telekinesis. You can do that big kinetic thrust I was talking about to maybe blast boulders out of the way or knock enemies down, that kind of stuff.
You got to get those inverse kinematics in. Right.
Oh, yeah.
And the archery. How difficult is that to achieve? Given that this is based off of real motion and all that stuff.
Do you mean from a developer standpoint, or like how difficult is it for a player to like land a shot with archery?
More a player standpoint.
I mean, it requires a fair amount of skill. In VR, a lot of physical activities pretty much directly draw from your ability to do them in real life. And archery is more or less a perfect fit for VR. A lot of people figure that out early on, so it's directly up to you and how accurate you'll be with it. Right? The bows all function. They all function similarly in the way you would expect them to, and it's just how well you can line up your arrow and account for the pull of gravity. But it's pretty satisfying. Like especially we reward you for getting headshots and long range headshots, that kind of thing. So it's definitely the most skill dependent aspect of the combat, but it's also the strongest as a result. Like you can hit a lot harder with a bow hitting someone in the head than you'll hit them with slashing your sword, for example.
That's about what I expected. I think that's something that might not be easily conveyed if people haven't tried VR before. Like, just how much skill it can take to do things.
Yeah, even throwing fireballs or throwing in VR in general, a lot of people, you could see there's a broad spectrum of people who are good at it and people who, have basically no athletic skill whatsoever.
Right. And it's also, this is all one-to-one movement, so you're going to get a lot of articulation.
That's one of the things that really drew us to VR was how much your like actual physical capabilities in terms of like movement and stuff like that played a role. Like actually like jumping out of the way of an attack, if you have space in your room and stuff like that, you can do that,
Definitely.
So things like that were making the combat reactive enough and engaging enough to where they would have to be able to do that kind of stuff was really what we were aiming for.
Yeah, I know personally for me, I remember, growing up playing various games where you'd be in a fight with someone and then they would hit you with something where I would think at the time, if I were really there's no chance that would hit me. Like I would not be limited to what my character is limited to. And this is ridiculous that I have to like endure this. And then in VR, you don't. You're not limited to what your character can do aside from, general restrictions like how fast you can move, artificially. But if, like my brother just said, you can potentially jump to the side of the room, or if you're on the Oculus Quest and you could legitimately be in a field and have just a ton of open space and just run around
or duck under the attack.
You have a lot of options.
Yeah. I guess another question in that regard is how much of an exercise routine is this? Because,
this fat fuck plays freaking Beat Saber every day to freaking lose weight.
Huh? I mean, VR can be a hell of a workout. Our game in particular isn't really very demanding. I know some people have effectively played it wrong and like thrown out a shoulder because we have a requirement, like my brother was saying earlier, with the combat where you have to swing sort of on a wide arc, right? Like it has to travel a certain distance at a certain speed. It's not a very high speed. It's kind of, if you imagine someone doing like Tai Chi in the park, that's fast enough. But you have to do these sort of wide swings. And I know that there have been a few people who have done like, they're trying to do it as fast as possible and they're effectively throwing their shoulder out, even though the game says don't do that. And we do everything we can to discourage it. Like you'll even do less damage, right? It's not a desirable play style, but some people have tried to do that, and felt sore afterwards. But VR in general, you can do a lot as far as exercise goes. There are some games and apps that are specifically designed for it, like We Fit kind of things. But I mean, you can get a hell of a workout.
Indeed. And backtracking on an earlier designation, you mentioned boss fights are handled differently than regular fights. In what fashion are they handled differently?
So it's like basically that's another nod to kind of Zelda and then a little bit Dark Souls in that regard. Those are two of our kind of favorite games that we tried to really take inspiration from for this. Along with like a game called Soul Reaver and Legacy of Kain games, and then The Witcher and stuff like that. But the boss fights are unique in the way that it pretty much always incorporates something that you've learned in that area, and it's always like a kind of puzzle that you have to solve to some extent. So it's like that's where it's kind of like Zelda in a way, where it's like you get a new tool that you're gonna have to use to progress past these bosses in these dungeons.
Yeah, I get what you're saying. Like, you get the, say, fire staff to burn the big moth.
Yeah, right, exactly. In our game, you would get like there's a troll, and you get early on you get these bombs, and then when you get to the troll, he's got bombs. He's dropping bombs, and there's these pillars around the area that are cracked, and the cracked texture is what indicates what you can use bombs on. So the player basically is just running around this room trying to like use the bombs against the troll, doing like no damage, trying to hit the troll, doing no damage because it's just like a stone skin troll kind of thing. And then they have to like figure out, oh, I gotta get, and he does like big sweeping attacks, and he gets stuck in these cracked pillars. So then the player has to realize, oh, I gotta use the bomb that I've been using to like break all these barriers to get up here, because they've broken multiple barriers with cracked texture on it to get there. They have to realize, oh, I got to use that bomb to break this pillar, and then they got to break all three pillars, and then like an event happens that basically kills the troll for them. And so it's like there's the way to beat the fight isn't always straightforward. The player always has to use their head, and we've gotten many comments on a lot of like the puzzles and the boss fights and things like that, where players always go, "Oh, I was beating my head up against the wall, and I was trying to figure it out, and then like just something clicked in my head, and I realized, oh, that's it." And they had that aha moment, and they were like, "Oh, so stupid for not figuring it out." And my brother and I really tried to do that. That was a very specific like design choice that we were going for with most of the things that we made, where we wanted to elicit that exact response.
Yeah, it was important that we would give you these sort of little like brain benders, and then if you struggled with it, once you did discover the solution, it would always be a facepalm moment where you'd go, "Oh, obviously," right? Like as long as our goal was, as long as someone afterwards, if they struggled with a puzzle, can take responsibility and go, "Oh, I should have realized that," then we're good.
Yeah, basically, is a trick to it is kind of making it so simple that they overthink it. That's a good part of
Yeah,
doing
for some of them, yeah.
Some
Or I
of
mean,
them are
we've got
like that.
some riddles or things that have like double meanings that people have to interpret different ways, and then not all of the bosses are specifically puzzles like that.
True.
I
Yeah,
mean,
some are just
it's maybe
mechanics.
a 50-50 split, but some of them are just, hey, you've been playing the game for a while, so we're going to assume that you're competent at this point with things like the melee fighting or with your archery, and we're going to put it to the test with this guy.
Right. And that's usually what boss encounters are. Kind of a final exam for the stuff you've learned up to that point.
Ideally, yeah. I mean, there are a lot of games, especially in VR, not because it's mostly
Right.
indie devs making games, but most of them that I've encountered are kind of just bigger enemies, right? It's like the same sort. You do the same thing. It's just this guy has more health, right? Which is not. It's something we desperately wanted to avoid. We wanted it to be more, like you said, sort of an exam, as like a gateway to the next area, saying, "Hey, make sure you've mastered what you've experienced up to this point before you move on, because it's going to get harder from here."
Yeah.
Well, I mean, I suppose a question I have in that regard is, does the inverse hold true? That is to say, like, beginning boss encounters, sometimes, you fight the same enemies later on as regular enemies, but they're a lot weaker to showcase your progression of power. Do you do that in this game?
No, not really. We have
Well, the basic mobs that you fight, there are sprinkled in like the basic ones from every chapter throughout the game. So it's like you'll fight some goblins that are just like, easy to fight and kill later on in the game, and yeah, you'll be like, oh, I'm one-shotting them. But the bosses progressively get harder all the
and the
way up until the
bosses
end.
don't reappear. They're one-offs. I
Yeah.
mean, there's one boss. Well, there's two bosses in particular that you fight sort of weaker versions of them. We have like a fire wraith boss in chapter 2, and then a giant fire elemental in chapter 4, and they have sort of like trash mob versions of them, like regular wraiths and regular elementals that you'll encounter. That sort of give you an idea of what to expect from them.
Okay. And I guess shifting focus a bit, I think we touched upon it a bit, but how is the upgrade system handled?
There's a few. There's
Several,
quite a
yeah.
few. Yeah. So we have various things you can discover to just give you direct upgrades. Like there are life fruits, basically these magical apples that you can find and consume to increase your maximum health. There's mana veins you can use to increase your maximum mana. There are these shrines that you can find and light with the fireball, and they'll give you like destruction power upgrades. But then there's
There's
also,
elixirs.
yeah, there's elixirs which give you perk points that allow you to sort of customize your build a bit. Like there's no classes in the game, right? You're what's called a seraphim in the game, which is a nod to Soul Reaver,
Right.
and you have archery, magic, and melee fighting, like we've mentioned. But you can then sort of specialize in those. You can put points in your melee fighting to do more damage, for example, or have your enchantments reactivate faster and eventually unlock dual wielding. You can do the same for archery to do more damage, have more arrows in your quiver, and or enchant your arrows at the end. Magic lets you, use less mana, have it regenerate faster, and then eventually you unlock all new spells. Like you'll get a new powerful spell for each of the schools of magic. And then beyond that, we have, like I mentioned, the stones that you can use to enchant your weapons to give them different effects, like life steal, mana steal, electrify, frost, where you can slow enemies, which is really useful, especially if you're not particularly adept at the melee combat. It'll help you out a lot to have enemies slow down when you hit them. And then there's rings, which is basically directly inspired by Dark Souls. So if you've played Dark Souls, there's you defeat bosses and then you'll get their soul and you can typically use it to create a new item or a new spell or something like that. And we have something similar where you'll get a gemstone that you can use to infuse ring bands, either iron or gold. And depending on which one you infuse, you'll get a different effect. So for example, that troll that my brother mentioned earlier, when you get his gemstone, you can then use that to either when you're mining, because we have mining in the game where you use a pickaxe to like gather ore, you'll get more ore from the different nodes. Or if you find treasure chests, if you get the other ring, then it'll have like double gold in it, things like that.
Yeah. And I think I saw like blacksmithing in the trailer.
Oh yeah,
Oh
yeah. There's
yeah,
crafting in
yeah.
there.
There's
You
that too.
can
There's a bit of crafting.
Yeah, you can
Yeah.
gather gold, or we added mining pretty early on, and you can have gold ore, or you can get iron ore, and then with the iron ore you can find recipes throughout the game, and they're hidden. You always have to like we did a lot of hiding of stuff where you have to like go look for things, and there's swords and recipes and upgrades and stuff like that, all hidden throughout the maps that you'll have to actually go explore them and find them. And
Yeah,
then
exploration was a major focus.
yeah, 100%. And then the recipes are the best swords for each chapter. Basically, if you find the recipe, that's going to be the best sword, because you're going to
Yeah.
have to find the recipe and then mine the ore to make the weapon. And then you can also smelt like break your weapons down. Like you can salvage your weapons to get your some ore back.
Yeah, they're by no means necessary, but if you do get them, they'll be a pretty significant upgrade for you. Like they'll help
Yeah.
you. There we have a traveling merchant that shows up in each chapter multiple times, and he'll get new stock as you go further into the game, so he'll have new better weapons to buy. And if you happen to get the recipe and craft a sword, you'll basically skip over the first upgraded weapon that he sells for the new chapter. Like you can pretty much ignore that and go directly to the next strongest one. We also have weapons that are just hidden in each dungeon. So every dungeon has a weapon hidden in it. It goes sword, bow, scepter, and then a bow again at the end because we have 4 chapters with 4 different dungeons. And those are far and away the best weapons you can get in each chapter. But they're very difficult to find. They're not something you're just going to stumble across. You're going to have to really put in effort and try to make sure you scour every inch if you're going to find them.
As you'd expect. And how long would you say the game is overall?
On average, it takes most people a little over 15 hours to beat, but some people really take their time. I've seen them take closer to 30. And then there's a fair amount of replayability with the different specializations and weapons and rings and all of the other upgrades you mentioned. So we have some people that have put in like over 100 hours.
And honestly, now that we added the fast travel, we just added fast travel in before we left early access. That like honestly, I think that's going to increase the replayability quite a bit too, because people will be able to just like quickly go back through all the areas and scour them for things they might have missed. And
Yeah, we've had quite a few people in our Discord that they'll be looking for because they're like achievement hunters. They want to make sure they get all the different weapons and things. And they'll come in and they'll go, "Hey, like, can anyone give me a hint as to where this thing is? I know it's supposed to be in this dungeon somewhere." And the fast travel makes that a lot easier for them to just be flying around the map. Basically, it's pretty much waypoints where you can go to an archway and then select a previous one you visited and go back to it quickly.
And were there any ideas you wanted to implement in Ventral Rights here that you couldn't?
I one, I guess, and it was really more of just a time constraint thing, or you have to, especially as a small indie team, you have to make sure that feature creep doesn't get out of hand, right? We added a lot of things that we didn't originally plan when we first started, but they were all, in service of for sure the game needs this, it'll make it better. But there was one thing I wanted to do with the 3rd chapter that basically would have required us to make a second game. It was more or less
oh yeah,
you get on a ship where you have to help this ghost captain to get across the ocean and bring you to the next area. And when we originally talked about it, it was basically going to be Sea of Thieves? That's what's
yeah.
called.
It was basically would have been like Sea of
Yeah,
Thieves,
it
like
was
a
going to be
mini
like
Sea
you're
of
going to
Thieves.
go on this epic boat journey with them, and then you'll get other ships attacking you, and they'll damage yours with cannons, and you'll have to repair it and then fight back and destroy them. And we quickly realized that's that's a bit much. That's basically what some games make that their entire game. So I don't think we're really going to go with that. So we elected instead to just have you solve a few puzzles around that ship initially, and then when you're done with it, he'll just say, oh, off we go, and then it'll basically fade to black. You'll hear the ocean, and then you'll show up in the new area.
Yeah, we smoked and mirrored it.
Yeah, that's probably a wise choice.
Yeah, it would have added probably several months to at least 2 or 3 months of development time if we tried to do that, and it would for what would have ended up being maybe a 15-minute portion of the game.
Yeah, that probably wasn't worth it.
No, had we a bigger team, I'd have been all about it, but
Yeah.
You got to be judicious when you're deciding how to spend your time like that.
Yeah.
Well, was it just the two of you that made Ventral Rights?
Yep.
Yeah, from scratch. We basically tried to not use any like pre-bought assets or pre-made anything. We tried to learn how to do, apart from like stuff that we knew we couldn't do, like shaders and music and things like that. Like we tried to do everything from scratch so we could actually. This is our first game. Like Basically, like we tried to
Yeah.
learn everything we could, so that way we were basically full developers. We weren't going to be like, oh, we use this plugin and that's how we knew how to do this. It's like, no, we made it.
Yeah, all of the code is from scratch. It was very much a learning experience for us going through. We basically treated it like an education that we got paid to get.
Mm.
So
Yeah.
pretty psyched about that.
Now it's making money. So
So it's been doing well since it left early access.
it's been
Yeah,
doing pretty good.
yeah,
I
it's
mean,
definitely a significant boost compared to what it was while in early access.
yeah, it's definitely enough to luckily take care of our bills for the most part because of our situation. We have a pretty cushy situation, so
Yeah, our bills are dirt cheap, so we're coasting.
chilling.
That always helps.
Yeah,
Right.
it's been nice.
So are there any plans to bring Ventral rights to PlayStation VR?
Uh, not unless they reach out. Honestly, at this point, we both started moving on to like working on new games. We basically consider Ventral rights pretty much done unless anyone really wants us to like put it on their platform, and then we can negotiate with them, sort of thing. But at this point, we're just working on new things. Like
Yeah,
I
we
already am
basically
on a
moved into the
project.
support phase of it. It's
Yeah.
pretty much just as people report bugs or quality of life issues, those will be addressed. But beyond that, we're moving on to new projects at this point.
Okay. And how far along is the new project or projects? Anything that can be talked about in the here and now, or something that would have to wait?
Barely worth even mentioning at this point. We're actually working on different projects,
Yeah.
and they're both in super early phase. I've been working on mine for not even a month at this point. I mean, it's coming along pretty quickly, but I wouldn't even talk to anyone about it probably for 6 months.
Yeah, and the team and I that I'm working with currently are a couple, maybe like 6 to 8 months in, and we got a ways to go. So
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that makes sense. Given that the game's only been out of early access for a few months now.
About 6 weeks. Came out right at the end of July.
Okay. Yeah. So new conceptualizations would be in its infancy on that matter.
Much, yeah.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I suppose that's my gamut of questions. I'll see if my colleagues here have anything additional they wish to ask.
Do you have any accessibility options for people who have like limited motion and stuff like that?
The only accessibility things we really have were for motion sickness. We have a few options for that, but as far as limited range of motion, not so. I mean, you can play the game um, sort of how you like, right? We give you a lot of options. So, for example, you don't have to even use swords potentially if you're a decent shot with the bow or decent with your magic. But if you're gonna rely on the sword fighting, it kind of demands that you have full range of motion.
Mm. I think that's it for me.
Okay.
Oh,
Alex?
and we've made sure to take into consideration color blindness for various puzzles and things, that sort of thing.
yeah, we were pretty aware of that being a thing, so we tried to just avoid the primaries as much as we could.
Mm.
Okay.
That was actually the main question I had. So
Okay. So I think that'll about do it. It was good having you both on the program to talk about ventral rights in full. And we certainly look forward to whatever projects you end up generating in the future. But until then, the game is Ventral Rights. It's currently available on pretty much like the Steam, Oculus store that it's like a VR store of your choosing, basically, for $19.99. Although on Steam, you can also pick it up in the Master Swordsman VR bundle with the Morrigan. That's $31.98 there. Though that is an entirely different game, as I understand it.
Yeah, that's just, but it's one that we discovered early on. We had a lot of crossover in the people playing our game and his game. We reached out to Bundle, and he was very receptive. He was all about it. It's been great for both of us.
Okay. Fair enough. Well, I'm like, be sure to pick up either Ventral Rights or the Master Swordsman VR bundle today. Petty, play us to the next segment. All right, welcome to the topic of discussion. So, as mentioned at the top of the show, we are talking about Sonic Colors. I'm trying to think if we actually talked about the game itself in the past, because that feels like
I'm sure we
this
have at some point.
it's definitely something that would have come up, but this is more about its present situation than the game itself. Because unless you've been living under a rock, Sonic Colors Ultimate Edition has been the subject of a lot of controversy. Some of it warranted, some of it actually not warranted. Because, and yeah, I noticed there was a bit of a disconnect there. So the basic outline of what's going on with the new version of Sonic Colors is a botched port job. A lot of glitches, a lot of frame rate buffering. A lot of
There have
things.
been a lot of really spectacular glitches posted, and a lot of those are not common, but some of them are replicable, which is usually not a great thing.
No, it's not. And it's also worth noting that the amount of bugs does differ on the version that you get. I'll say flat out right now, the Nintendo Switch version is probably the one to avoid until a patch comes out, because that's the one that's. And I am pleased to say that Blind Squirrel is working on a patch or patches. But okay, so like one of the big reasons how we got here with Sonic Colors is on the dev team being, all of the versions, we're talking like 4 versions, because the Xbox and PlayStation versions, they're not native PlayStation 5 or Xbox Series X. They're Xbox One and PlayStation 4. So, you can upscale those on the newer consoles, but you're not going to get native 4K.
I think the Xbox version has a Series X patch to make it work better with it, but I don't believe the PS4 version does.
Yeah, I think, I saw the Digital Foundry video today, and they pointed out, the presentation's best on the Series X. Though I will note that video didn't have the PC version. Not shocking, because Epic Games paid presumably a lot of money to get Sonic Colors Ultimate Edition on their store.
And it's like
the problem
for what, a year?
Or more relevantly, not on other stores.
Yeah, it's probably going to be a year. That's the usual amount. Though these things can be either more or less. Sonic Colors might be less because it's a high profile, but I would expect a year on that regard. Point is, it's on the Epic Games Store, and since it's on the Epic Games Store, that's a much smaller store than Steam. And I can't say that Sega's gone out of their way to advertise the fact that the PC version exists. I'll mention the multi-platform stuff, but I'm going to go out on a limb here and say that the console versions were the priority. Anyway, so all 4 versions were done at the same time. One Blind Squirrel Games. They do have a history in remastering and bringing old games to new systems. In fact, they just finished a project this year that got a lot more fanfare and praise. And that's Mass Effect: The Legendary Edition. Widely regarded as one of the better updates in recent times. I will take their word for it. I've actually never played a Mass Effect game. I've had the first 2 in my Steam library for ages, but I've never gotten around to playing them. No.
Didn't the second one require Origin?
I think that I don't think so. Like the second one came out before Origin, and that never disappeared. So
Fair enough.
I think that the issue with that was like the DLC for Mass Effect 2 was Origin only. That's in fact why EA left Steam for a good long time. They had a big argument over DLC and the cut therein. But that's neither here nor there. It's about Sonic Colors. So we're talking like 3 versions versus 4 versions, and most notable is they've never done a Switch project before now. So
I read something about they might have done one, but it was a minor thing.
Yeah, like this is the first Switch project of note. So it's not a surprise that the Switch version is having more problems. But it's not just an experience issue. You do have to remember that the Switch has less power, so it's gonna have some effect there. Though that is in the sense that the new models don't look as good. It's not a power thing. Like, for fuck's sakes, this is a Wii game. Like, it's not a power differential that's causing problems here. That's causing a shit frame rate. Because we've gotten other Wii games ported to the system. For fuck's sakes, Skyward Sword just came out.
Which is also a Wii game.
Yeah.
Xenoblade Chronicles also looks amazing.
Like, we could go on. Like,
but they also used the Godot or Godot engine.
Yeah,
that's I've heard some people confused about why they would do that. I don't know exactly why.
Like the Godot. Well, it's because the Godot engine wasn't made for something this big.
But the reason why they chose it would have been, I guess, because it can output to different platforms easily. It looks like maybe.
Like I said, this is just an unusual situation because nobody's ever done this with the Godot engine. And yeah, it is the backspine of what Blind Squirrel calls the Blind Squirrel engine, which is something like the Kex engine, and it's more of a wrapper to put a game in and improve things rather than a wholly new engine, because it's still using the Hedgehog engine, as they call it.
Because that's what the game was, made for.
Yeah. But yeah, it's a solution that's had problems, especially since the makers of the Godot engine actually put out a statement regarding Sonic Colors using it. Apparently, it's using an older version of Godot.
Oh god! Damn it.
Oh, that's fun.
Yeah, and they pretty much said, yeah, it's not really meant for, that version of Godot isn't really meant for something this big, and that's causing some of the problems. Right.
Yeah, and something like that's not always something you can really update without, remastering the game.
Yeah. And it's also worth noting that this is a game from Sega, not Nintendo. It's like Nintendo is only going to have like the one version of a updated Wii game. But, remember, like Nintendo, they're very focused on quality, at least in regards to their porting efforts. I will admit that brand new Switch games, performance has been awful for a while. And that's kind of why people want a Switch Pro, is because Nintendo is really starting to hit the limits of what the Switch can do. It can do a lot, but it's like it's struggling to run like Luigi's Mansion 3. But this is to reiterate, it's not going to have a problem running Sonic Colors on a power level. It's more powerful than a Xbox 360, goddammit. Anyway, and that gets into, as far as the reports of the bugs themselves, as I think Gollix pointed out, Some of them have been less than. You can replicate them, some of them sort of, but not consistently. Which that's a big reason why there's such a disconnect between the reviews and the user reports. Because if you look at the reviews of the game reviewed quite well. And I was wondering what was going on there. Especially considering we are talking about a pre-patch. Usually sometimes there's a day one patch, and reviews are actually operating on a pre-day one patch.
And keep in mind that day one was actually like 5 days after a lot of people got their hands on the game, because the official release date was yesterday. It's just that people who had the digital deluxe edition or whatever got it like a weekend early.
Yeah, what they called early access. Like, it wasn't a long period of early access, but I guess it's technically correct. Yeah. But so in regards to some of the worst bugs, the ones that went viral, they were done on a particular brand of emulator as it came out.
Well,
not
some of them
actually.
were,
yeah.
But yeah.
Yeah. The big one to note was the seizure-inducing bug.
Yeah.
That apparently came from a particular brand of emulator and not real hardware. What is being said here is, this game is still buggy. It's still not good, but it's been exaggerated a bit.
If nothing else, you are unlikely to get the most severe kinds of errors that people have seen.
Yeah. It's still probably best to wait until the patch, or maybe the next patch, because, here's another thing about patching. Sometimes, especially if they're rushing to get out a patch, the new patch will break some things it didn't intend to. And, they'll have to wait a couple of days or whatever to fix that. Yeah. So that's what's presently going on in regards to Sonic Colors Ultimate Edition. Like, as far as the game itself, the core is still there. It's still Sonic Colors. How well
they added the Jade Ghost Wisp, which I think was added in like one of the racing games or something.
Yeah, it's like it's got some new cosmetic stuff.
But
like,
I will say the Jade Ghost Wisp is kind of clunky right now.
Well, some of the other ones they've added since then would not work well in colors, I think. Like Crimson Eagle, or what is it? I forget what fucking color the Melody one is. Probably would be a little bit awkward. But yeah. I mean, even in the original one, there were some that were on the 3DS version, and some that were on the Wii version. 3DS, DS, whatever.
Yes.
So.
And I guess it's also worth noting that the DS version is still stuck on the DS. Not a surprise, given that you don't see a lot of DS ports, because the DS was a fairly unique system, and even when you port a game out outside the DS, it doesn't mean it's going to be better.
Yeah, only console that probably could have been able to do the DS version justice is the Wii U.
Yeah. Anyway, so yeah, I think that'll about do it for Sonic Colors here. At least for now. We'll see if they can fix things.
Don't make the Sonic fan any more sad.
Right. Anyway, and yeah, that'll do it for this installment of Fragments of Silicon. As usual, if you enjoyed what you heard tonight, be sure to subscribe, hit the notification bell. You do all the things you need to do to be aware of when we broadcast. On that note, the week ahead. So on Friday, we don't have the regular morning show, or I guess quasi-regular. Instead, we have been a long time since we had one of these. We have a multiplayer affair to do on Friday night, probably like 9, 10 o'clock. haven't quite figured out the exact time. But point is, we will be doing a multiplayer playthrough of the Tetris Effect Connected and Fling to the Finish. So yeah, 2 games that will be up for review this week. Indeed, the Sunday reviews, the Tetris Effect Connected. Have a Blast for the Nintendo Switch, Apple Slash for the PlayStation 4, and Fling to the Finish. And as usual, there will be a new episode of Last News Desk on the Left in about 20 minutes, we hope. Like, might be 35. We've apparently learned the reason why Mac is sometimes late to the party, so to speak, but we won't dwell on it here. Let's just say his digestive system has had adverse effects in regards to COVID, or at least that's what he told us. Anyway, so on that note, I shall wish you good gaming.